Hello, everybody. A warm welcome to another interview on Wisdom from North. I'm Jannica, and today I'm here with Adriana Diaconu. Diaconu.
Yes, it's good. Perfect.
Adriana is an intuitive and she is an emotional master, and she's passionate about helping others really achieve emotional maturity. And 4 years ago, when she gave birth to her daughter, she experienced going through a postpartum depression. She got help from a psychologist and she entered a rebirth and a rebalance in her life. And today she's helping people through a YouTube channel, through private sessions, to really achieve emotional maturity and to really invest in their inner landscape and with their inner work. Hello, Adriana. How are you doing today?
Hello. Very well, thank you. What a nice introduction. I would have not said it better myself.
Well, thanks. I just got your name wrong because I had been practicing Diaconu, but then it was Diaconu. Beautiful.
Perfect.
Name.
Thank you.
So I just looked at your YouTube channel and I see you're doing a lot of amazing work, and I really resonated or identified with you in a way because you've been going through a depression and I have as well. However, I haven't gone through your type of depression, which was a postpartum depression. And I'd love to speak about that today, and also emotional maturity, because like I said to you like a few minutes ago, how is that possible, to be emotionally mature? Because it's like we feel sometimes that the emotions are controlling us and not the other way around. And it's really so inspiring to watch your YouTube channel, because from someone who has been through depression, and it's said that 1 out of 4 is actually going through it. So there's a lot of you guys out there that have or are experiencing the same. It's amazing to see how you're glowing today,
Oh, thank you.
yeah, and helping others. So,
well, there's light at the end of the tunnel, no matter where you are in the darkness. That's something that I can definitely say.
Right. So tell us first, what is the postpartum depression?
Well, postpartum depression, it's something that most of women don't know that they even have it after they give birth to their child. It's something very under the skin. It's very subtle, and it takes a lot of bravery to admit to it, because underneath the happiness of having a child and the happiness that everybody talks about, well, I had a child, I should be in heaven now, I should be glowing, and I should be really happy. Underneath all that, what people don't see, and what women they don't want to admit, is that it's a little bit of a loss of an identity. Once you give birth to another human being, what happens is that you are fully responsible of that human being. So in that moment, what happens is that you have to kind of give up on you. And meanwhile, before having a child, usually this doesn't happen. Or if it happens, you convince yourself, well, I give up on myself a little bit for, this relationship, or I give up on myself because of, I'm a little bit sad, or I give up on myself because I want to pursue this career, or I want to do this in my life. And you kind of lie to yourself a little bit. But with giving birth, you is just so strong that there's absolutely no excuse that you can say to yourself anymore. It's kind of like it's a master program of being a woman and being human, because there's nothing more transformational than giving birth. And I can definitely say that. And postpartum depression, it starts basically because you give up on you. The second thing is that you realize that what you are today in the role of a mother, it's something that you have never been before, and the person you've been before, you're never going to be again. It's a moment, it's a split second in time, the moment that you give birth, that you completely change. And it's very hard on the body, on the mind, of the identity that you've tried to build your entire life. And in that moment, I remember actually after giving birth, about 20 minutes after that, I went to the bathroom and I stared in the mirror and I stared into my own eyes. And I will always remember that moment, because I stared and I stared and I could not see me. And I was like, who is this person that just appeared here? And it was so strange because the transformation, it's spiritual, it's physical, it's mental, it's all the programs and everything that you have been building for, I don't know, 20, 30 years until that moment, they just vanish, or they explode in your life. So you change drastically, and you look back and you're like, I'm never going to be who I was yesterday. Did I really died? So in that moment, when I looked in my own eyes in the mirror, I realized that I died. And what people don't understand, that with this cathartic moments, when you're having an accident and you were close to death or you almost died, when you're going through cancer or a terminal disease, when you go through labor, which is kind of like dying a little bit, you go through this experience that you die and then you literally become another person. The body has so much strength that it doesn't need to die physically for you, your entire being, to actually die. And then you're on the other side of the fence, and with this depression creeping on, and you're like, okay, so I have to take care of this child now. I have no idea, because this is the first time I've been through this. I'm a new person. I don't get time to know myself. What is going on? And this child is crying all the time. So it's a very, very difficult moment for a human being in general to go through. I was happy and glad enough that I had my husband with me at all time. And if I would have not had him, I have no idea what would have happened. I'm a highly sensitive person. So everything that I went through, it was very exaggerated. Every single feeling, every single contraction, every single thing, every single cry of my daughter, every single step was much more than a normal state. So that is, I think, the basis of a depression: the loss of your identity, the fact that now you're fully responsible, not a human being, and it's very difficult in your life. The women that they most suffer from this, the women that have been very, very independent in their life, this fighters in life, and they have achieved so much and they have high careers, and it's a huge shock for the body and for the mind when you realize that you're not on your own anymore, and then someone actually depends on you 24/7. And it's really, really strong on someone. And we take this for granted, but there are kids being born every day, and we're 7 billion people at this point. And I think motherhood, parenting, and having a child, the fact of bringing a life to this planet, it should be much more talked about, because it's something that we're doing constantly, and everybody's like taking it for granted. It's like, well, yeah, let's have a baby. It's something so superficial. But that's why I really wanted to talk about these things. And I talk about it in my therapy. I talk about it in my YouTube channel. I talk about how important it is to look at depression and to understand why is it there, to understand what your blockage is. Another aspect that I would like to mention, very important through giving birth, is that when we are pregnant as women and we give birth, what happens is that we recover, because life is cyclical. So everything, it's a repeating cycle. So when you are giving birth to your child, it's a cycle that repeats from the moment you were born, when your mother was pregnant with you. So what happens is that you have to understand, how was my birth? How did I came here? How was my mother living with the pregnancy? How was I living in her womb? How was I feeling all these things? So if there was some imbalance in that moment, you can definitely say that once you will be pregnant, you will be downloading those things that they're not fixed, and you will be downloading them in that specific moment, and you will be faced with exactly the same thing, because you have to solve them. So it's kind of like a connection in time. We say that travel in time doesn't exist. Well, this could be it. So in the moment that you were pregnant with your child, you're automatically connecting yourself to your mother through all her pregnancies, and specifically to yours, to your grandmother and all her pregnancies. So this is we should not take this lightly. This is programming, that went through generations, ideas that we are just downloading, and many of them are polarized because whether they're good or bad, and we don't understand. We just download them and just take them like this, and we try to make something with it, but all this at a very subconscious level, because consciously we don't understand what's going on.
Very interesting. I mean, I haven't been pregnant myself, so I wouldn't know about this. So I'm very glad you're addressing this, and that you're passionate about changing the stigma around it, because it's so important to speak about it and understand. And when you explain now, I'm like, oh my goodness, will I get that if I get pregnant? Because loss of identity, I cannot imagine how that would feel like. And that was really powerful, I gotta say, and it makes sense. So you spoke about downloading from your mother and back in generations. Do you mean that, for instance, you as a mother, or when you're pregnant, you are repeating the patterns in a way? Or is it an energy you're repeating? Oh, I didn't understand what you were downloading from your mother and grandmother.
Well, to explain this very simply, I have an analogy that I usually make about this, and I talk about the two boxes in our life. The two boxes, which is one box that we put the label of good, and then one box we put the label bad. So what happens when we enter the world, where we don't come with specific boxes? These boxes are created through life. And what happens is that in these boxes, we have things that happened in previous generations, things that happened into our life, that if they created a negative emotion, we'll put it in the bad box. If they created a positive emotion, we'll put it in the good box. Let me explain this. So this would seem simple, and this will seem, well, that's fine. That's actually no problem about that. The problem is, let's say that for you, let's say that you were born into a mother that is very violent, okay? So you would understand as a child doesn't understand necessarily that being beaten by your mother, it's a bad thing, because the child is completely connected to the mother, and it sees the mother as a, let's say, a god almost, because it needs the mother to survive. It's your only source of survival. So you would see it as your god, literally. What happens is that everything that your mother would do, you will take it as something you've done wrong. You will not think that your mother is doing anything wrong at any moment. So your mother beats you, or anything else that you would consider, you as now a mature person will consider a bad thing. You will take that, you'll be like, oh, okay, well, it will not go in a bad box necessarily. It will go in a box, it will create a program that will go, if I behave like this, and like this, I'll be treated good. And it will go in the good box. And then if I don't behave like this, and like this, I'll be treated bad. So in one incident, you can have a split, and you will have one item that goes here and one item that goes there. You would say, well, what is the problem with that? The problem is that in that moment, you have polarity, which means that when you are being like this, you'll be punished. You will be like this, you'll be praised or rewarded. In real life, this doesn't happen, because many times I'm sure that you found that you can be good with someone and they treat you bad back. And you would say, how is that? My program says that if I behave like this, I should be treated right. And then that's when the conflict comes, because life is not that simple. Life, it's not polarized. Life, it's not black or white. And in these boxes that we have, we keep filling them in. Good, this is bad, this is good, and this is bad. And it reaches a moment where your box is so filled that every single thing that you do in life, you will go to your boxes and be like, okay, so was this good or was this bad? And you have lost the ability to understand reality as a complexity, that it's not in any of those boxes. That something that you can perceive today as good, tomorrow can be bad. And something that you perceive that it was bad when you were 5 years old, today you would look at it and you'll be like, well, that was not really bad. And to explain that, for example, a child can be traumatized by a simple thing, as a baby is put in his crib and left there to sleep. And then at some point in the middle of the night, he wakes up crying. And then the mother doesn't hear it in the moment. And the child actually went through a trauma. It's nobody's fault. It's not something, the child is not unattended literally, but what happens, that creates a trauma, and you carry that trauma all through your life. What therapy does and what emotional maturity does is for you to go back in time and to understand, okay, was it really bad to take this stigma and to take all these programs outside of these boxes of good or bad, to understand that things there are, they're just not good or bad, they just are, and you have to take it in and just learn how to cope with them. Emotional maturity comes in play very good with this, because you have to understand emotions as just signals. You get this signal, and then you're a receiver. You receive that signal and you understand it, you process it, and then you understand that that information got inside of you, and that's okay. You don't have to stick with the emotion. You don't have to blame others for making you feel like this or feeling bad because of what you feel. Emotions are just a measurement unit, for you to measure, the state that you're in, where to be active, where to live, where to stay, just like animals, in the woods, just like tribes before, in Neanderthals and Homo sapiens, they needed emotions for them to protect themselves in very difficult situations. So what you need to do is use those emotions when you're in a difficult situation, but not stick with them. The emotional maturity really comes in for you to understand, I am using this information that I'm perceiving right now, and then I will use my mind after that to process all this. We cannot just stay in the emotion. We have to lift up the emotion and just try to process it. Okay, what was this about? Why did I feel like this? When did I felt like this before? This is a repeating event. Have I ever felt like this before? What is this message? Because we're just like receivers. We're like antennas, and then we receive the signals and we have to interpret them. So that's why I even forgot what was the question about.
Yeah, I'd love to actually dive deeper into the emotions, but I'd like to go a bit back again. How did you start to work through your depression when it came? Because you said it lasted 2 years. That was a long time. How did you experience it? Because the way I experienced it was like this cloud over me, and everything was just like monotonous, and the reality appeared gray to me. That was like my experience. And if I had like a little light, it was like I felt like the sun was coming, from behind the clouds. Like that's the way I describe it. So how did you describe it, and how did you move through it?
That's a very great description, actually, as a gray cloud. I discovered it. I don't really know. I didn't discover it really. I was just really feeling bad. I would have never said I was depressed. And I was really, really feeling bad. And one of the, like I said, we are receivers. So we get this sort of messages. And one of the messages that I got is that my body was in imbalance. I was overweight. And after giving birth with my daughter, I could not lose the weight. I actually gained more afterwards. And I was not really understanding. I had huge trauma about my weight. And I was punishing myself through that. And I was like, okay, I have to do something about this. And, spiritual growth, and you read people and you look at people, and nothing was like really convincing me. I finally found a psychologist online, and I really resonated with her because she talked a lot about abortions, about pregnancies, about kids that they were born after abortions, which is another typical trauma that happens if the mother had an abortion and then the next child that was born. I think they're called rainbow children. In therapy, they're actually called differently because they're not rainbow, but they're withholding the energy of the dead child most of the time, not because the child wants or the previous child wants, just because of the mother could not handle. So it projects the energy of the dead child into the new one. So it's something very, very heavy. So she started talking about that, and it was very interesting to me because I am a child born after abortions, several of them actually. And I really resonated with that. I contacted her and we started therapy. We started actually online therapy. And I was so convinced that this is it. This is going to help. I don't know how much time it's going to take me. And it took me 9 months of therapy, 2 times a week, sometimes for a couple of hours each session. It was really intense, and I kept calling her for emergency sessions. And I am the type of person that never asks for help. I've never thought that I would need help. I'm very strong. And that's another message that I really want to take to people, is that we don't really understand how weak we are and how vulnerable we are. And we don't really admit in this society that we live that we actually need help. And there are moments that just someone listening
So important.
to this babble that we have in our mind at this point is extremely helpful. So I had her, and she listened and she listened and she listened. And then I like to call it very colloquial, she called me on my BS, because I was just I was just talking a lot of nonsense at that point. And I love that. I love that it was cathartic again when someone tells you like, you know, do you think that you really wanted that? You know, things that you do, things that you say, oh, I want my daughter to be the healthiest and the nicest and the happiest. And like, and she just tells you that at that point, how you projecting a type of happiness on your own child is actually going to hurt him or her, in my case. And the fact that you don't give the freedom to the child to be, it came the same way as you came, as an individual, independent individual, with the strength that it needs to deal with whatever life gives it. So my problem was that I was a perfectionist, and I was a control freak, and I wanted everything to be perfect. And through that perfection and control, what happened is that I completely lost myself. I was so dedicated to be this that I completely lost myself. And through her sessions, she just helped me understand, you have to come back to you, because your child is not you, you are you. So she helped me step by step come back to that. Depression, like you said, it's a dark cloud. For me, it was more of a, how is possible to have this amazing husband, I have this amazing life, I have this amazing child, and I'm so miserable? How is this even possible? And I was even punishing myself with this thought. And I was like, how dare you? How dare you be unhappy?
Yeah, the shame comes along with that.
Shame, you know, like, people are suffering in this world. What are you talking about? And that is really not validating your own pain, because you are going through a lot of pain, and that you are just trying to cope and trying to cover the reality with, oh no, people are worse than me. People, no, you're very bad. You're in a very bad situation. You went through a very difficult thing, and you have to acknowledge that. Whatever comes out of it, well, you will deal with it. But for now, it's validation, and you have to give yourself that credit that you, I don't know, you brought a life to earth. If that's a little thing, what can I say?
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. I'd like to hear more about emotional maturity and how we can work with that. Not having a psychologist, I really believe in therapy. However, sometimes we don't have the chance, and it could be great to work on ourselves. Because I was reflecting about this a few weeks ago, I had a roller coaster in my emotions. Because I was going through something with a person I knew. We were kind of breaking up the friendship in a way. But then it's got sorted out. But like in the moment, I was like, oh, this is great. And in the next moment, I was having grief. And in the next moment, like I was like being showered with all these different emotions. Like state of emotions, like inner states, in a sense that I felt like I'm not like controlling this. It feels like it's just coming over me now. Oh, relief and happiness is coming, and oh, now grief and sorrow is coming, and I'm like, I was in so many states during a day. It was like ridiculous. And when we talk about emotional maturity, so how could I, in a way, address that or meet that in the most like self-loving way? I think I met it in a pretty good way. Like I was letting it happen because from my point of view, we're not supposed to fix the emotions. And you spoke a little bit about it. We're more supposed to like let it tell us a message, like it's a signal, and then let it move through us. And I'm interested in that process because when I'm there, and maybe you guys that are watching, when you're in the midst of that heavy emotion, it's like, okay, so now I'm going to not judge it, accept it, but how do I do it? How do I do it?
Okay, so one simple way to understand this, it's a very simple process that I do in therapy. And recently I've done it with a friend of mine, actually. And it's to understand that every single person, every single member of your family, every single gesture of your child, of your son, of your coworkers, every ray of sunshine, every glass that you drop and it falls on the floor and it breaks and creates any emotion, anything around you, it has nothing to do with the person in front of you, but it only has to do with you. Well, starting from that point, you have to understand that if you're dealing with a person and that person wakes up a certain emotion in you, you have to understand that it's not the person. It's really something that that person is just, it's like a bell. Brought a bell and it's ringing on your ears. Listen, you have not dealt with this. Listen to me. So it's a bell. It's a synchronicity. So a lot of people talk about this as mirroring, because what the people around you, what they are, is just that they're a little mirror of your inner shadows. The things that you don't want to look at, they're not shadows because they're bad. They're shadows because you are in denial of them, because you just decided not to look at them. That's why they're in the shadows. A lot of people talk, oh, the shadows, oh, the dark corners of your soul. No, they're just the things that you have not wanted to look at it before. Mainly because you're afraid of what you can find. Most of the time, you will not find something very bad. I can guarantee you that. We're all humans. And, you know, one of the things that I try in therapy to do is to understand that humanity is not bad or good. There's no demons and there's no angels and there's no things like that. Humanity, it's a huge complexity of personality. So you are good and bad and evil and the devil and an angel all inside of you at all times. So what happens is that when you decide not to look at one of your demons, one of your angels, or whatever you want to call it, a person will pop in front of you. Whether it's your partner at home, he just comes back angry at work and, you know, says the first thing that comes into his mouth. He thinks that he just said it. But for you, it's exact synchronicity. It's exact sentence that you needed to hear for you to awaken these emotions that you are in denial of. So the process is, I'm having a very hard time with someone. Instead of looking at their life, I'm going to stop using the third person in anything that I'm talking about. I'm not using the third person. I don't care about that person. I'm completely disconnected of their life. No judging. I don't care. What I'm going to do is, as I said, how am I feeling? Why is this happening to me? Why do I feel like this? What is this message that this person is trying to bring me? Have I ever, like I said before, have I ever felt like this? This is something that this person already did to me and I'm trying to be in denial of. This ever happened before? This is something that it's repeating, because usually it's something that it really repeats. We think that our life today, it's so unique and so magical, and this had never happened before. But they're just cycles that repeat themselves and they repeat themselves and again, and they repeat themselves with another character, another person, and another timeline, and in another environment. And the same action can happen with a friend, and then with a member of your family, and then years after it can happen with your own daughter. So it's just happening again because it needs to wake up something in you. This is very particular, because that's why I personally like therapy, because it's very specific for each person. That's why you cannot generalize too much. It depends so much on the history of that person. It depends so much on the moment that that person is living, because they receive that moment specifically when they need it. That person said what they said to you. That person talked the way they talked, or the boyfriend split up with you in that specific moment because that was the moment that you needed it. So you have to look at also the moment.
Do you mean that the universe is orchestrating this?
Yeah, exactly. It's everything. It's exact. Nothing. It's because, I don't know, casualties. There's no such thing. Everything is specific and everything is exact. And most of it, everything is exact for you. That's why my advice is, forget about the third person. There's no he, she. No, nobody's there. This is only your projection. So you have to focus on you. Okay, why am I feeling like this? why this is happening to me. My depression, it was most of the time because I was constantly thinking about everybody else. How is my daughter feeling? How is my husband feeling? How am I doing this for the other people? How am I managing this? How, there was no moment that I was literally saying, okay, what about me?
Yeah.
Am I happy with this situation? Am I really okay with being here right now? Am I happy with being 95% dedicated to my child as I am right now? And in many other moments in my life, I mean, this is the last one and the most cathartic, let's say. But there was many other moments when I was just so involved in other people's opinion and other people, you know, projects and plans and structures, and in university when you study and everything, it's like a gathering and everything. And then you're like, okay, wait a second, but what about me? So depression comes to tell you two main things. First, that you have forgot about yourself, completely forgot. Sometimes it's a little, when you just have a little bit of anxiety, and sometimes it's a lot. And the other thing that depression comes to tell you, and it's a great master. For me, depression was a great master for you to understand that you are obsessed with control. Depression comes and tells you, you are not in control of this. What you only can do is manage how you feel. That's all you can do. Everything else around you, it's out of your hands. There's nothing you can do about that. So when
we can manage how we feel.
You can manage what you feel because you're managing it. You're not controlling what you're feeling. You're managing. For me, I make the analogy of treating a life as a business. Because when you're a manager of a business, when you're a businessman, an entrepreneur, what you do is that you don't control people. A good leader doesn't control people, or you don't control the operation. What you do is manage. So this issue comes into my company. I'm going to try to manage it and just solve it. I'm going to learn from this situation and solve it. Sometimes you have to fire someone, literally, but that's also part of the management. You're not controlling. Controlling, it's more of a, should I dare say it, it's more of a governmental structure. When there's one or two or a few, they want to control others. But management is when there's a togetherness. Like, okay, we're here together. We're going to manage this. Me, emotion of anger, emotion, like your split personalities and all those things, they're with you and you're managing. So you're talking with your anger. Okay, how can we deal with this? You know, it's like a meeting, like a business meeting. So you sit down.
Talking with your anger, like with an emotion.
You have to understand everything in you. You can understand it as personalities. My anger, you can put it a face, and it can have a face, and you can chat with it. My postpartum depression, I can put a face on it. I actually have one in my head right now. And you can chat with it. It's like, okay, how can I help you? How can we deal with this? This is not really helping. It's not helping you, and it's not helping me. So it's all about management, but not with people outside. Not how we think that everything, you know, projecting energy outside. Everything is within. It's like I'm dealing with my emotions and I'm managing my emotions because I'm talking with them. I'm giving them voice. I'm giving them space to be expressed. And then I'm learning from what they're teaching me. Emotions, the only reason that they appear is because they want to teach you something. So they keep appearing because you have not learned anything. That's why I keep having the same reaction with the same person, with the same number. That really bugs me by the same time that he comes and, you know, knocks on my door, the same emotion all over again, because I'm not learning anything from that. Also, the situations repeat. I have the same boyfriend and the same boyfriend, and then I get another boyfriend and he does the same thing, and another boyfriend that does the same thing, because I have not learned. So that emotion is like, okay, I'm going to come with the bell again. I'm going to ring the bell at your door. Maybe someday you will listen to me. So for me, that's what I said. You're a receiver. So these are just information. So you have to be open to information. Not receiving an emotion, it's like denying information from the universe. Literally, that's what it is. This is the information that we have to take in. People, and that's the difference between controlling emotions and managing emotion. To manage it is to take it in. It's like when you cook a meal, you know, you take the ingredients, you peel them, you take care of them, you chop them. There's a process, you know, when there's an integration and all those ingredients to create a dish. The same you have to do with emotions. You have to take the emotions, mix them, take care of them, and then with all that, you make a batter and then you create something new from it. Emotions are there for you to create something new, because some part of you have become obsolete, because some part of you is still living in the past, because some part of you, it's not really necessary for you to have it anymore in the present. I might be very abstract with this explanation. Let me know if I tend to be very abstract.
No,
Tell me if you need more practical explanations.
I think I get the gist of what you're saying. Still, emotions are very, very complex. And for instance, when sadness comes over you, sadness is not necessarily something that goes away if you just learned the lesson. That's what I'm wondering about, like these feelings that are coming again and again, because there are different triggers. For instance, my grandma.
For instance, I'm sorry.
Yeah, something sad happens and sadness comes over me. I just feel like processing and being in that sadness and allowing myself to be there, more like working it out in a sense, if that makes sense.
That's the difference. In my opinion, there's a lot of spiritual teachers and a lot of spiritual people that say you just have to feel the emotion. That's just half of the process. The feeling and the validation of the emotions, that's just step one. Step two is that you have to process that information. You have to understand why the emotion came in the first place. And just like we talk about triggers, I get triggered because of those things, because I needed that information to pop in my life. It was really necessary. So this is the misconception that, feeling and being happy, like, no, you have to feel all the negative emotions. Emotions are not bad for you. They're just indication of something that you have to work on. Basically, that's it. I can give you a small example, more practical one. For example, many times when let's say that we have a rejection towards a person, like, oh my God, my entire body is telling me that this person is just not what my values, my ethic, my morals, like really not. And I dealt with that in therapy with a specific person in my life. And my therapist told me something, I still find it today so funny. And today I find it funny because it's so true. Well, she said, well, once you're going to heal this, you're going to meet the person, because you're afraid of meeting them again. You're afraid of being with them again. Like, oh my God, yes. Once you're going to heal this, when this is going to be over, you're going to enter the room. That person will be there. It's going to be like a wall or like a piece of furniture, because we'll have no trigger for you. You will have no emotion waking up when that person comes anymore. And I was like, no, that's not possible. This is not real, because you have this anger or specific emotion or disgust by a person. You're like, this is never going to go away. I am so definitely sure about that. But then it does. And it scared me when it happened, because that's why I said about emotions you can manage, but because you have learned what the lesson was, so the emotion does not have to exist there anymore. So that emotion disappeared. Now I can see that person. I'm like, okay.
Well, yeah, I definitely feel it's possible. And then you probably went into why do you feel the resistance, what happened,
Exactly.
and go back. So it is, I guess, an awareness exercise in a sense, or is it also something to release from the body, like an energy, if it's stuck in the past, if this story goes back in the past, and there perhaps was a trauma there. Do you think that you need to release that, or is it more of an intellectual and spiritual awareness of what happened?
No, I don't think it's an awareness. It's for me, like I said, the boxes, the analogy of the good and the bad. The good and the bad boxes are filled with programs. So I talk a lot about in business or a computer terminology for some reason, but I find it that there are very good analogies of what happens in the mind. So what happens is that you have programs. I have the program that men are like this, or women are like this, or a wife has to be like this, or motherhood has to be this way. So those are my programs. They're fixed programs. So they don't give you freedom of you being whoever you want.
So attitude and beliefs in a sense? Exactly.
Belief systems, programs in any way. So what happens is that you have these programs in your boxes. Once an emotion comes as a trigger and tells you, listen, you have a program in that box. You have to look at that program. So the emotion is the wake-up call of that program. So
Oh.
then if you're aware of that, you're like, okay, I'm gonna dive into my bad or good box. I'm gonna
Ah.
take that program away, and I'm gonna like, okay, like a book. Okay, let me read this. What is my impression about men? What is my idea about family? Okay, so my father was like this, so I understood that fatherhood should be like this. My cousin was like this, and so on. So you read your own life as a book. You're like, okay, this is not really balanced. This is a lot of polarity because I'm putting men in one single box. I don't have an open mind about this. So you try to understand it. So it's kind of like putting, I said one time before any of this happened, about 5-6 years ago, when I was dealing with some of my father issues, I sometimes in my family, my father was the evil guy and my mother was the saint. And there was a very specific moment in my life when I realized the bad people are, the monster is not so bad and the angels are not so good. And that was a very crucial moment for me to understand that people that seem to be angelical and nice, they are not. And people that seem to be really big monsters, they have great teachings for us. And I've had this in my body for so long now, and I find it so true, because we dismiss people that are bad and we're like, oh yes, you're good, come, this is good. But underneath goodness, there's a lot of programming. Like I said, polarity is good and bad box. A person can be very good or a person can be very bad, but none of them are good. None of them are positive for you. None of them are beneficial for you because they are polarized, which means that they're one pole and the other. The point of therapy also is for you to be as in the middle as you can be, for you to see it from outside and to be, okay, this is not bad or good. I don't care. I'm leaving. This is not that bad or not that good. To be able to be neutral as possible. And as many times you have to make decisions, to make it from a coherent point of view, to be coherent to yourself, not to your boxes, but to yourself. To yourself meaning my intuition, my mind, my emotions, and my body. So I connect all these things that are mine with all my personalities and all my monsters and all my things, and I'm coherent with them. I listen to all of them. I kind of like make a brainstorm session. I sit them down in a meeting session. I'm like, okay, guys, let's talk now. Bring it on. Who else? Who wants to give their opinion? Let's brainstorm. Let's find a common solution. Let's manage this. And that's what should be our internal world. That's what we should understand by working inside. You know, not for me, it's not so spiritual. I've been into the spiritual path for some time, and I understood that it's way too fantastic, let's say. And why do I mean by that? Because I believe that even though I believe it's true, I believe we should not live with that mentality. Because if we came to Earth, it's for us to be Earthlings, which means that we have to be grounded, which means that we have to do with our humanity. And our humanity, it has to do with our emotions, our demons, and our scary stuff. And all that has to be
spiritual. That's spiritual to me. It depends on how you look at spirituality, what you put into that label. What is spiritual? That's the biggest question.
What is spiritual? For me, spirituality, it's when a person is more focused on the upper part of humanity,
Right.
of the human existence, than the lower part.
That's not my spirituality. So I agree
Okay.
with you. It's super important to be grounded. Super important. Otherwise, you're just escaping.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you could agree with me that, for example, there's a lot of spiritual practitioner and spiritual movements that they do have this understanding of only from half up, you know, all the upper chakras and the enlightenment and looking for happiness all the time and all this mental work. And that's not really you know. You're human. You're supposed to be, you know, with all the sexual energy, with all the, you know, giving birth, with the animal self, and everything in between. That's what makes you human. You would have not been here to be a human if you were not supposed to deal with these things. You would have been in a 5th or 6th or 7th dimension if you would have to be a light being. You're not a light being. You're a human here. So you should be channeling this and managing the emotions and managing your body and trying to read this like, okay, this is my human existence. You know, it's like a game. You know, like I came to Earth. Okay, game on. What I'm gonna do now? This is for me. You know, it's empowering because it gives you, you know, the thing like, okay, doesn't matter the emotion I'm gonna get in. I'm gonna manage this. No matter what time of the day, no matter what happens, I'm gonna manage this. I'm gonna learn from this as much as I can. That for me was it was more growth than the spiritual teachings that I've been listening to.
Yeah, I mean, it really resonates, your perspective and angle on how to manage emotions. And to me, I know what you're speaking about. For me, it's just a different perspective on spirituality. Like spirituality for me is, but that's me personally, is all about the shadows. It's all about the emotions. It's all about the grounding. But we all have different approaches to it. Some are focusing on angels, you know, some are focusing on channeling. Others are focusing on the galactic, whilst others are focusing on more personal development or enlightenment. Or so there's just so many, like, what is spirituality? That's like we will never end that discussion in the sense, because there are so many different perspectives. And I don't think it's so, you know, important either. It's like what works, right? And I really think it's super important what you said, to be grounded and here, because we are human beings. We are that for a reason. We're going to learn through our bodies and listen to our signals. And I love that, calling them signals. I felt like I learned a lot today. So at the end of this interview, can you tell us, what are you working on right now? I know you're doing your YouTube videos and you're having clients. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I also have my website where I have a blog and I post some of the articles I like to write. I'm also thinking about writing something more of a consistency, you know, something bigger. I'm a very good storyteller, so I believe that I could do a good thing in that. Another thing that I wanted to test myself with is psychology. So I enrolled into university and I'm a psychology student now, just because I think if you want to change something, or if you want to do it, you have to do it from inside, just like you do it on a personal level. You have to work with your inside. So we have to, if you want to change something in society, you have to do it from inside, let's say. So for me, being a psychologist, maybe, you know, involving myself in researches and trying to understand the human mind, and trying to come up with things that will you know, penetrate throughout history as much as possible to understand. I'm very focused on helping the humans on Earth now. You know, I'm very focused on now. I'm very pragmatic too. So I'm working on understanding the human mind and how to help humans right now in the moment. And one of the ways it's definitely through therapy, because we all need to talk with someone. Really need to talk with someone. And the other one is to understand, you know, to have an open mind, to as well as I'm interested in spirituality and I read a lot. I am interested in astronomy and I read a lot, and I am a psychology student and I read researches and I read psychology and anthropology. And, you know, you have to have a very open mind in all these things. You cannot narrow it down and this is the path or that is the path or there is no such thing.
And they're all connected.
Yes. There's exactly. So the more information you have from many areas, the more you will be able to have a more complex understanding of the complexity of our mind, which is extremely complex. So that's my focus right now, is to understand more and more and to be able to teach more and more. Yes.
Wow, amazing. And gotta say, you're doing amazing work. Thank you.
Thank you.
This was very inspiring, and I feel like you're helping a lot of people with what you're doing. So thank you so much for sharing and being brave to share your story also today. And
yes,
much light to your beautiful work.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Sure. And thank you so much for watching, everybody. Much light from here. Bye-bye.